What's up, everybody? Here is a rare double video weekend from me. This one's just going to be nice and quick. And it's going to be about a Springans deck that I've been working on a little bit recently. If you watched YCS Vegas last night, you'll notice that the two most represented decks by far were Kashtira and Branded. So I've been tinkering for maybe the past 2 weeks with a Fossil Dyna list for Springans, because the deck can very easily make Gallant Granite and just normal summon Fossil Dyna. And Fossil Dyna is a very strong counter to both Branded and Cash, because pretty much their entire, those decks very rarely have normal summons that can out the Fossil Dyna. And they're heavily reliant on just special summoning things like Kashtiras from hand, Branded Fusion, Polymerization. Right? They're very reliant on just being able to special summon guys to start their combos, and they don't really have many normal summons. Also, Branded in particular doesn't play many board breakers, so I feel like I really wanted to go hard on this, and I do have some combos for you to show off the Fossil Dyna lines. So the way you start it is just Goldona plus any level 4 Springans. So I'll show you my deck list at the end, but I am maxing out on Goldona and level 4s, and I'm cutting back a little bit on some of the other Springans monsters, just to try to see the two openers as much as possible. So this will start the same way as a lot of Springans stuff. Also, this is very loud. I'm going to turn this down real quick. We are going to use the Goldona to send the level 4 in our hand to grave to get the Merrymaker. Merrymaker is going to dump Brothers. Now we're not going to use Brothers effect here, because we're going to use it much later in the combo as an extender. Because right now we're just going to attach both of these to our Merrymaker so that we can get a super big tally-ho off here. We're going to make the Sargus. Sargus is going to search for tally-ho. If you already have Tally-Ho in hand, you can search for Therian Regulus, which gives you a negate. And I will show that later, just for people that are curious. We are going to use the Tally-Ho detaching all 3 materials, which is going to allow us to summon 3 monsters from hand. One of them being the kit that we searched off of the Tally-Ho as well. Now we're going to do something pretty interesting here. We're going to use Kit's effect to search for a branded spell. You don't have to use Rocky here if you have Regulus, but you can use Rocky to potentially chain block the Sargus, or if you just really want the Merrymaker back in the extra deck, you can use that. But what we're going to do is we're going to use Sargus to bounce the Brothers to hand that we just summoned, and we're going to get Branded and High Spirits off of the kit. And we're going to put back a random card in our hand, because we have to do that. So Brothers doesn't just trigger off of being sent from deck, it also triggers off being sent from hand, which High Spirits does send for effect. So we will get to proc the Brothers here. So we're going to make the Gallant Granite, detaching a Springans to search for the Fossil Dyna. And then we get to go for the High Spirits, sending the Brothers. Brothers is going to special summon the Rocky. Now if you didn't use Rocky earlier, you can use Rocky to grab back the Brothers here so that you have follow-up next turn. So keep that in mind. If you open a bunch of hand traps and you don't think you'll have much follow-up on the following turn, you can add back the Brothers, which is very nice, because it kind of revives and summons a monster by itself off of Goldona. And then we can use the kit that we added off of High Spirits, the special summon, because we do have the Sprint in Graveyard. And then we're going to make a Redoer here. You can also make another Merrymaker, but I think Redoer is potentially fulfills the same role, but also a little bit better than making a second Merrymaker, because it will not only trigger Sargus when you use its effect to banish itself, but it will also trigger Goldona. So if for whatever reason your opponent like Book of Moons your Sargus or imperms your Sargus on their turn but not the Fossil Dyna, and they try to like normal summon a monster and run over the Fossil Dyna, you still have Redoer to detach, use the Goldona so that that opponent's normal summon can't attack. So they still have the Fossil Dyna lock. And then after we summon Redoer, we just normal summon the... Okay, stop. We just normal summon the Fossil Dyna, because we did this entire thing without even normal summoning, which means we just get to normal summon the Fossil Dyna, and neither player can special summon monsters. And then Sprint and Grave, during the end phase, we'll add a Springans to our hand. We can't special summon Sargus because we are under our own Fossil Dyna, but we do get to add follow-up for next turn in the form of Rocky. So we can go Rocky, add back Brothers, and then Brothers pitch off of Goldona, and it makes like 2 rank 4s by just off of like adding the Rocky here. So there's tons of follow-up. Also, during your opponent's standby phase, you can use Redoer to potentially get deck knowledge by attaching the top card of their deck. And if you get like a spell or trap, it's also just extra advantage. But you can use Redoer to get deck knowledge so that you kind of know what your opponent's playing before you start using your interactions. But at the same time, you need to be worried about triple tactics. Like either of the triple tactics is going to be really rough here. I would probably go for the Redoer just to get deck knowledge. But games 2 and 3, they might potentially side like tactics or something, so probably don't use Redoer here. So for example, like they can't special summon, so if they have to normal summon and try to beat over the Fossil Dyna, you have 2 options here. Both are going to be triggered off of using Redoer in the battle phase. So you can Redoer to banish itself. So what this will do is it will detach material, which will trigger Sargus, and an Xyz monster left the field, which will trigger Goldona. So you can use either one here. Sargus can either destroy the monster or bounce it to hand, but if the Sargus is kind of offline for whatever reason, the Goldona can also just prevent that monster from attacking at all. So you kind of have like 2 different ways to protect the Fossil Dyna. On the following turn, you will get your Redoer back, but we are still under the Fossil Dyna lock. But there's a very easy way to get around that, and that's just by using the Tally-Ho effect in Graveyard to detach the final material from our Gallant Granite, which will trigger our Sargus, bouncing the Fossil Dyna to hand. So now we have like access to our full combo with Rocky and Goldona and all that stuff. So for example, we can just make an X-Blower, normal summon the Fossil Dyna to play around, I don't know, stupid shit like Battle Fader or whatever. And then this is just game on board. So if your opponent doesn't really draw any kind of out to your combo, and they're forced to normal summon to beat over the Dyna so that they can play the game, you can just like bounce it or stop the attack or whatever, and then that's just kind of game on its own, really. So it's like a really cheeky turn 1, maybe like game 1 gimmick. That could also potentially work games 2 or 3 if you're up against a deck that really doesn't have a whole lot of non-engine space like Branded. And we do actually have a way to put up a negate first, so that cards like Nibiru and Book of Eclipse and some other things like Imperm potentially, Evenly Matched is another big one. But thankfully we do have ways to put up negates in the form of Regulus. So if you draw Goldona plus a level 4, and if you draw either Tally-Ho or Regulus, or potentially like Pot of Prosperity to try to dig for either of those, you can actually put up a negate before you really go for your big combos here. So we're just going to go through all the same stuff. attaching both of these to the brothers, making Sargus. Sargus will add either one that we don't have. So if you have one, you just add the other. And at this point, we've summoned twice. So we can go for the Tally-Ho to add and special summon. Now, unfortunately, we have summoned... If you summon these 3 monsters, that is exactly 5 monsters that have been summoned. So we can get Nibiru'd here. There are ways to put an extra machine engrave before you use Tally-Ho to get Regulus on board. If you open like Springans Watch, for example, that just dumps a machine engrave kind of for free. You would also need like extra extenders to do this, but there are ways to just kind of Tally-Ho for 2 instead of 3, and just like leave one of these engraved to use the Regulus. So if you are scared of Nibiru, there are situations where you can summon the Regulus first, but unfortunately that's just kind of how it goes. You're playing a rogue deck. You're gonna get Nibiru'd, that's just kind of how it is. But there are ways around it if you can summon the Regulus before you use the Tally-Ho. Or you can just summon 2 monsters off the Tally-Ho and then use Regulus as the 5th summon. So, unfortunate, but that's just kind of how it goes. We're gonna do the same thing we did last time, where we use Kit and then bounce the brothers to hand with Sargus. That's going to add the High Spirits, and then we're going to put back a random card. Now, since we do have a Merrymaker in graveyard now, we can summon the Regulus. Unfortunately, we can get Nibiru'd on activation of Regulus if they haven't already. And that will attach the Merrymaker, because this Merrymaker can't be, like, resummoned because it wasn't summoned properly, so we can just attach it. And then we are just going to go for the exact same line as last time, where we go for the Fossil Dyna off of Gallant Granite. Do the 2 special summons. Make Redoer, and then normal Fossil Dyna. End phase, you can add any Springans you want to your hand. If you added back the brothers off of Rocky, I like getting the Branga here, because if you can pitch the Branga to the grave, it can search a Tally-Ho without you having to use the graveyard effect, because Tally-Ho can only use 1 effect per turn. So if you search it off of Branga after putting it in grave, you can like soul charge the same turn that you search it, which can help you get back into a game if this board gets potentially broken. So this board does protect you from things like Evenly, I guess also cards like Lightning Storm, but those aren't too popular, as well as Book of Eclipse, but it can only really protect you from one of them. So you just have to kind of hope and pray that your opponent doesn't open 2 outs, because if they only open 1 out, then you can just negate it. But if they open double, like if they open Eclipse plus Evenly, then you just kind of got outdecked, or maybe just rogue deck problems. But this is pretty much the ideal setup for the combo. It's not actually super hard to make, right? Because you play here. I'll go to the deck list real quick. So this is what I've been toying around with. You'll notice I'm kind of maxing out on the level 4s, as well as access to the field spell. Because if you open Goldona plus Any 4, it does make the combo. And I am playing 3 Tally-Ho and 2 Regulus, along with Pot of Prosperity. I do want to see at least one of these in every hand as well, because putting up the Regulus negate can mean life or death for the deck's end board. Because people are, as I'm doing, people are going to be maining Book of Eclipse and Nibiru. Especially rogue decks are going to be maining both of these. So you really need to be able to put up the Regulus, so I am playing 2 Regulus just to try to draw it a bit more than usual, along with the Prosperities to help dig for either one. So that's pretty much what I've been working on. I think Fossil Dyna, I hate to play this deck just as like Fluanderies 2, where it's just like protect the floodgate monster. The more I played with this deck, the more I realized that the generic rank 4 pool just isn't quite as good as it used to be. Like, yeah, you can end on a Baguska, but most decks just kind of have an out to Baguska these days. So being able to put up a Fossil Dyna instead is a lot better, but you still have the Baguska to fall back on if things get really rough. Like if you have the high spirits plus the brothers and you get nibbed, you can still make a Baguska after you get nibbed, because these cards alone create 2 level 4 bodies. So even if you do get nibbed, you can still put up a Baguska and potentially also summon the Fossil Dyna, depending on how late they use their Nibiru. So I don't know, Baguska plus Fossil Dyna is a pretty good inboard, I think. But yeah, I just wanted to show off the Fossil Dyna combo, and I'm gonna test this out to see if it's any good, because I think it is quite a solid floodgate against both cash and branded, and also against many rogue decks that aren't Labyrinth, I guess, but you know, Labyrinth can just pop it or bounce it or whatever, so they don't really care. But I do think Fossil Dyna is worth looking into in this format.